All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. As you guys know, I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston, and we're so excited tonight to bring you another event. We've got Valerie Wilson Wesley and Angela M. Sanders with us. I'll bring them out in just a second. But while we take a second for everybody to be able to come find the stream on Facebook and YouTube, do some quick store intro stuff. So as I said, I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. I say here, I'm actually in my living room at the moment doing the event. But as again, I'm the event coordinator at the store. We have been in business since August of 1980, so we'll be celebrating our 41st anniversary later this year. When there's not a pandemic happening, we typically will host at least 2 or 3 author events a week in store. Now that there is a pandemic, we're of course doing them virtually. So this is, I think, our 4th one this week and our 3rd cozy one. I'm also the resident cozy reader in the store, so I'm so excited to be able to bring these authors with you tonight. So I wanted to mention that the store is now open for browsing. We've been open since Halloween. So if you are looking for just your fix to be able to get into a bookstore and get some personal recommendations, please come visit us. You know, masks are required to come in the store, and at the moment we're limiting capacity to 6 people at a time. So usually is not an issue. We just say if you pull up and the parking lot is full, maybe just poke your head in and see where we're at capacity wise. If you were watching in Houston, you guys know that we have a big storm heading our way. We've not quite figured out what we're going to do Monday and Tuesday, but we should be making an announcement about that probably tomorrow. We're just kind of waiting to see what the forecast was going to do for the next couple of days. A couple brief things before we get started. We have been having some issues with some spam stuff on Facebook, so just wanted to say if you see any links popping up asking you to click on a link to view the event, don't do that. You're watching the event, it's free, it's live. You don't need to click on a link and input your credit card information. If any of those pop up, I will be keeping an eye on them and I will block them as soon as they come up. But just kind of be mindful of that and don't click on any other links that will take you away from the live stream to watch the live stream. Also wanted to mention that we have recently started a cozy subscription series, Murder by the Box. So we've got 3 different levels. There's a best of the month, which could be literally any kind of subgenre in mystery. We also have one that is crime classics. That's classics, we call it crime legends. And then we also have the cozy of the month subscription. So if you guys are interested in that, I will drop some info about that. I'm actually really excited. We're chatting with Angela M. Sanders tonight, and her book, Bait and Witch, was the inaugural pick for the cozy box. So basically what it is, you can do either a 3 or 12-month subscription, and once a month I will pick one of cozy that I've read recently and loved, and we will get that sent out with you with a little postcard about why I liked it and some further reading suggestions. Also wanted to mention on Tuesday the 23rd, we will be chatting with Joanne Fluke. She's going to be in Houston, so we'll be live streaming from the bookstore, and she'll also be dropping by to sign some stock for. So if you are Hannah Swenson fans, you can order personally inscribed copies of that at the website. And the last thing I wanted to mention before I bring our authors out this evening is if you are new to our virtual events, welcome. You can check out the store's Facebook and YouTube channel to see all of the other events that we have been doing. We hosted over 130 of them with over 200 authors last year, and we are well on our way to probably doubling that so far this year. I have a whole playlist that is on the YouTube channel that is all of the cozy events. So if you're a cozy reader and want to know what else is out there, there's a whole playlist there for you. And also wanted to mention while we are chatting this evening, if you have questions for either author, you can post those in the comments either on Facebook and YouTube, and we will leave some time to get to those. So to get us started this evening, I'm going to start bringing our authors out. I'm going to start with Valerie Wilson Wesley, whose new book, A Glimmer of Death, has just come out. How are you this evening, Valerie?
Fine, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited about doing this.
We're so excited. When we saw that you had something new coming out, we were so excited. So I'm glad that we were able to do something. So for those of you who might not be familiar with her, Valerie Wilson Wesley is the award-winning author of the Blackboard bestselling Tamara Hayle Mystery Series and the Odessa Jones Mysteries, as well as adult fiction, children's books, paranormal romance under the name Savanna Welles. She is the recipient of numerous honors, including the Excellence in Adult Fiction Award from the Black Caucus of America Library Association, the National Association of Black Journalists Griot Award, the Amigirls Book Club Author of the Year, and the Literary Beacon Award for the National Go On Girls Book Club. A former executive of Essence Magazine, and Sisters in Crime board member. She is currently an artist in residence in the Cicely Tyson School of Performing Arts in East Orange, New Jersey. Wesley is a graduate of Howard University and holds master's degrees from the Bank Street College of Education and the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. She's married to noted screenwriter and playwright Richard Wesley and has 2 daughters. And she can be found at ValerieWilsonWesley.com. That is an impressive bio. You have done, it seems like, just a little bit of everything.
I actually have. I enjoy trying different things and the challenge of writing in different genres. This is my first cozy though, which has been an interesting. It's very different from the PI novels, and I must say I'm hopefully I'm getting the hang of it. So awesome. We'll see what readers will say.
I think you're getting the hang of it, and I'm definitely excited to talk about some of those differences between kind of PI stuff and cozies. So we are now also going to bring out Angela M. Sanders. How are you tonight, Angela?
I'm good, thanks. And while you were introducing Valerie, hi Valerie, Bitsy showed up here. So Bitsy Lamouche. Hopefully she won't be a pest.
I'm sure mine will make an appearance. Last night when I was interviewing the authors, he climbed up on my record player and decided to scale the bookcases behind me. So I'm sure at some point you'll see a little orange tail kind of pop up under. Yeah,
I hope so.
So as I mentioned, Angela is the author of Bait and Witch. She is the author of the bestselling Joanna Hayworth Vintage Clothing Mysteries and the Witch Way Librarian Mystery Series, the Booster Club Capers, and the Kite Shop Mysteries, written under the name Clover Tate. In addition to cozy mysteries, she regularly writes articles on food, vintage clothing, personalities, and perfume for Portland Monthly, Now Smell This, the French perfume magazine Nez, and various food magazines. A former congressional investigator, she now writes full-time and is a member of Novelist Inc., International Thriller Writers, and Sisters in Crime. Angela has 2 cats, one of whom is black, of course, a witch's freckle in her left eye, and learned to read tarot cards from a pagan priestess. She lives in Portland, Oregon, and she can be found at AngelaMSanders.com. Also, you guys both have these super impressive, wide, range of things in your biography. It's awesome.
I think that's a hazard of being a writer. You're just so curious about life. You just gotta, I tell people I've had every job except astronaut. Pole dancer. I never really got there.
So to get it, like I said, if you guys are watching live, if you have questions for either author, please definitely drop those in the comments. But so to get us started, Valerie, can you tell us kind of the elevator pitch for Glimmer of Death?
Well, I'm not that good at elevator pitches, but I will try.
You can stop on a couple extra floors. It's okay.
Odessa Jones is a young widow, and she has a sixth sense. This is where, in some ways, a sense of what can happen, kind of a paranormal, aspect to her. And the novel, basically, it's it's certainly a cozy, but I'm also dealing with other things as well. And so I'm saying I hope that it will fit comfortably into the cozy category. I'm not absolutely sure if it will. She is the novel in many ways is certainly it's mystery, of course, but a cozy is different from a PI novel, which I've also written, because you are looking at different aspects of people and different characters, and the character development is very, I think, essential and important to the novel and to the mystery, to the cozy. And I've enjoyed writing, and it's been an interesting kind of trip for me as a writer. And like I said, I hope that I have been able to go where I want to go with it and hope that readers will enjoy it.
Right. And Angela, do you want to tell us a little bit about Bait and Witch?
Yeah, Bait and Witch is about Josie Way, who was named Josie Way, so I could make it the Witch Way Librarian Series, by the way. That's her last name. And she's a librarian. She always felt in Washington, D.C. at the Library of Congress and the American Folk Life collection, in fact. Mm-hmm. And she always felt a little dull in her life, but totally dedicated to books. She overhears a conversation when she's deep in the stacks of the Library of Congress, mm-hmm. where I've been as congressional investigator. It's super cool down there. Mm-hmm. And ends up fleeing until the court goes to... till the case goes to court, because she's afraid for her life. One of her office mates has disappeared, and ends up in Wilfred, Oregon, and discovers, because of flying cross country, I don't want to give away too much, but that she's a witch. So we really meet her on the ground floor of her witchiness.
Mhm.
So one of the things that I like, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, in some ways, I think that both of our characters do share kind of a connection to the female part of their, like certainly with Dessa. Mine is Odessa Jones, as I said.
Yeah.
She has inherited this sixth sense from her mother's side of the family. She's not quite sure how she feels about it, because on the one hand, it can tell her certain things, and she can have a certain sense of people in rooms sometimes, and who are surrounded, But on the other hand, it kind of didn't tell her when her husband was going to drop dead, and so she does not really believe in it completely. But it's
that's a plus though, because whenever you're producing magic in a story, I mean, you can't make them know everything, because otherwise Dessa would walk in a room, go, "You're the murderer."
And that's what I enjoyed it about yours too, Angela. Was your magic really does? She's really comfortable with her magic. Where Dessa is not quite sure how she feels about this gift that has been bestowed on her.
She has a crazy aunt to help her out.
Well, Aunt Phoenix is quite a character, and one of my favorite characters. Sometimes when you begin to write and you discover a character, and I'm not sure where Aunt Phoenix comes from, but she's a lot of fun. And all of the characters, I think you'd mentioned before about cozies, and the thing about all mysteries have in common that, of course, you do have to have a fairly wide assortment of red herrings and people who may have done something or may not have done it. And each one always has a secret. And that, of course, is the challenge of writing them, and the fun of it is discovering within your characters what secrets they all have.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everyone in the book, of course, does have lots of layers of secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that I liked about both of your books, like you said, the characters kind of come at the magic from a similar way. Like, Josie isn't aware of this until she feels this kind of power come as she's flying across the country. And Dessa, also she knows a little bit about it, but she doesn't know too much. So as you guys were plotting these out, did you have all of the magic stuff mapped out, or were you also discovering kind of what these powers were while your characters were discovering them?
For me, if you don't mind, Valerie, I'll just step in here.
No, please go. Yeah, go.
I didn't know. I had no experience in making up magic systems, but I was in a bookstore, another read through. It's now just online right now here in Portland, and carved on one of the stairs, going upstairs, was this quote by Alice Hoffman that said, "Books are the only real magic."
Right, I saw that.
I'm going to make books. So her magic's going to be in books, because that's where her energy goes. And so after that, I've just been dreaming. I figure since Josie's starting slow, I can start slow too. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to collect, how can books give her magic? And the book I'm writing right now, I'm writing the third in the series, Witch and Famous. And she, it's always fun. The second one, which is going to be out in September, is 7-Year Witch. She's going to call in the detectives from different books and make 3 fictional detectives as her consulting detectives: girl detective, noir detective, and then golden era detective, which is going to be a kind of a sorry mashup of like Miss Marple and Sherlock Holmes and all these other people. That's going to be, but yeah, I just wanted, and I also wanted to make it slow. I think that some paranormal cozy readers, they want a lot of magic, but I wanted to ease into it. I wanted it to feel like people could almost imagine that they had that kind of magic and it was growing. So that's kind of where I came from.
I think mine too is in terms of the character and her connection to her past, her connection to the female parts of her family. And that's where she gets, in a sense, her strength and what's magical. And her magic isn't quite as strong, let's say, as Josie's is. It's not a full sense of magic of what she can do, but rather she gets hints of things. People have what I call in the book glimmers, where you may look at someone and suddenly they are shadowed by something that tells you a little bit, but not much about it.
And she also things. I thought that was really
certainly nutmeg. She always knows when death is coming, or when death is someone is going to die, or it's on its way, as I put it in the beginning of the book. Because there is a smell of nutmeg, which of course has ruined nutmeg for her forever. No more eggnog or in your coffee. But it's but it's also a sense of foreboding that that something is not what it should be. And it's, and that I think was something someone asked me recently, well, why nutmeg? And I said, well, why not nutmeg? Oh, I love nutmeg. But wasn't something, it's not a particular, as you said, mentioned magical structure, but I know. In the paranormal books that I've written some too, it was a different kind of investigation. I really had to look into things like witches and, this has been a lot easier to do in that sense. It was much more character driven than in some ways than magical driven. But there certainly is that paranormal and magical aspect to the piece.
Yeah, and I like how in both of them you do slowly dole it out. Like Angela, I mentioned when I was doing the intro that we had picked Fate and Witch as the first book in the cozy subscription thing that we're doing.
So psyched. I'm so honored. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And one of the things that I was looking at was, we wanted to appeal to a wide range of readers. And I know that there are some cozy readers that love paranormal stuff. There are some cozy readers that don't. And so I was reading it. I initially didn't want to start the subscription service with a paranormal one. I was going to wait a couple in. So, but like, as soon as I got to the point that like part of her magic power was being able to like recommend a book to somebody like kind of almost naturally, like boom, done. Like this is like, how could the first one not be somebody who can magically recommend books to people?
And so perfect. I enjoyed that aspect of it too. It was a really clever way to deal with the man.
Yeah, and some of the first cozies that I read when I first started working at the bookstore, Dean James, who also now writes as Miranda James, had done a series about a vampire who lived in London, in a little small village, or Victoria Laurie's Psychic Eye and Ghost Hunter ones, and those are like super paranormal. So I like that both of yours kind of have that, like you said, like you could almost think like somebody could have this power, and that, like there's just kind of like slight and something that you could potentially build on as the series progresses. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that your books both have in common is you both buck the trend in cozies where usually it's this really small community that's really close knit. So the main character has either just moved back and she knows all of these people, or she has this family unit around them. And with you, Amanda, Josie has just moved to this town to kind of fly under the radar. She doesn't know anybody. And for you, Valerie, Odessa, yes, she has her aunt, but because she's experienced this loss, she doesn't really have like close personal friends or family that she can go talk to. And I thought it was really interesting to see how you guys kind of developed that over the course of the book. So by the end, like they start to have kind of a sense of community. Can you guys talk a little bit about kind of that choice to have your characters kind of be on their own as the book started?
Go ahead. Well, so an important part of Dutch's growth is the connections that she makes and the realization that that you have to reach out to people. You have to leave yourself open. You have to show your own vulnerability, which has been very hard for her to do because she adored her husband. And they literally they did everything together. And he, as she puts it in one point, was the sun. And she was like, almost like a planet. But it's like, she's had to rediscover herself. And and part of that, which she's also broke, she doesn't have any money. And she has to find a job, and she ends up in this, kind of a shady realtor, but ultimately becomes Risco Realty, which ultimately becomes her place of work, and also where the murder takes place, and several things take place, and also ultimately the people she works with, who on first glance you say, "Oh my goodness, who are these folks?" But then later, as she begins to know them and understand them, they show who they really are as well, which is part of her growth as a person, as a character in the book. So it's a small thing. And also Grove's Tie, it's kind of very loosely based on a town near where I live. It's a Jersey town. I'm a Jersey writer. And I say proudly as a Jersey girl. And I think that people who know the area or might see it as know the town. But it's also so many Jersey towns. And I tried to capture that aspect of it. And we'll see. Hopefully I did.
And there's a lot of tropes in cozies. And I didn't necessarily want to play straight to the trope. I just wanted to have more fun with it. Like there is exactly like you say, John, where the heroine she inherits a knitting shop or a bakery or something like that. and finds herself. She's usually running from one man, and well, what do you know? The local sheriff or policeman is a real hot dude, and it turns into this regular thing. So I want to do something that was a little bit different. I knew that I wanted a witch librarian. I knew she had to have a cat, and I decided to make the cat show up in the town. And then beyond that, I thought, well, what could make it? She's got to be on the run. So where can she be on the run? Washington, D.C. I used to live there. I knew what that was like. She used to work at the Library of Congress. And, well, where's her library going to be? Well, what would be the coolest library ever? What if it's in a big old Victorian house? Yes. Yeah. You know, and so I just, I think part of it is just that sometimes the tropes get to be irritating. And so I wanted to try to buck them a little bit. But,
it's it's like with a wink, you play with it a little bit. You know, you make it your own, you know, and we both have cats in our,
like it's a wink?
Like a wink. Yeah, well, okay, right. But it's, this is the trope, but let me play. Let me have some fun with this. Right. And I think that's ultimately what you want to do. And it also, you bring your own particular twist to it.
It's nice to have the family, and like she does talk to her sisters.
She has a lot of family. Yeah, she does have family.
The middle of two sisters are all named after French queens, as her dad's like a junior college professor. And so then she can have some community sort of to start with in the beginning, but then she starts to build the community in the community after that. But good question.
Yeah. And, you know, I think it tends to, like, I tend to start a lot more cozies than I think I finish sometimes. But the ones that I find that I love the most are the ones that kind of, like you said, take those tropes and they play with it in a wink. And it's interesting to me how so many authors can take like the same bag of tricks and can do such different, interesting things with them. One of the things you touched on this, Valerie, is that, you know, both of the characters, they kind of, their power comes from like this history being able to connect with their mothers and other women in their lines. And I think one of the things that cozies don't get enough credit for is that, you know, usually it starts off, yes, it is this woman who has, you know, she's experienced some loss or a breakup or something, and she moves back to this town. And you kind of get to see her almost rebuild her life kind of on her own terms. And I think that's something that, like, I think that cozies don't get enough credit for, is just kind of the women being able to kind of come back and empower themselves after a breakup and kind of being able to learn and stand on their own feet again.
It's true. I think they have to be empowering to women. I think that's an important aspect of books that women love. And so often they're not appreciated, I think, in the way that they should be. It's like people tend to dismiss romance novels because women, dismiss cozies because
it's about relationships.
It's ultimately family. And that's what it all comes back to is family. And I think that you explore it as you create characters and you create, you know, plots, or they're always character driven. My feeling. And you begin to really explore. If you're going to look at a character, you look at the various aspects of the character, and much of that is family. Where do I come from? Where did I grow up? How did I, you know, how did I end up here? And for each of your characters, each of them. Also, the red herrings, they all have family somewhere. So in creating the character, in creating the novel, if it's strong and you want to make it as strong as you can, for me, that's the interesting part of writing.
The community. Yeah, exactly. The community, which is the places and the people. Yes. And I don't like to read my reviews, because even if I got 100 stellar reviews, if there was one that was so, then I would be just walking around. But every once in a while, you can't avoid it. You just happen to see part of a review. And I love it when people talk about the characters they like best. And it always surprises me, the characters. Like, you know, one person's like, the cat. The cat's my favorite character. I never think about the cat as a character. Or Linda, the caretaker, you know, and talk about secrets. Everybody has secrets. That tells me I'm doing something right. If I can build a world where people can go and feel that they want to belong, and it's funny and supportive, but still there's a puzzle to crack, then I feel like I've succeeded.
Yeah, I think that's a really essential part of it.
So as you guys, so what drew you both to cozy mysteries in general? I know, Valerie, you said you had been doing some PEI stuff and you did other things. So what made you want to dip your toes into the cozy world?
I think, again, the sense of this particular character was interesting to me, to create a new character in a new series. I'd written, you know, fair number, I think 9 PI novels, and as well as the paranormals and other things, and other standalone novels. And I hadn't really, this was a kind of a different subgenre, a different genre for her. It's a subgenre, I guess. And this was what drew me to it. Can I create within this particular genre, this character in facing the things that she faces? Also, there were 2 things. It was fun for me to create her because unlike the PI novels, which I also like to write, I was able to bring a little bit more of myself into it. My grandson has a cat who Juniper is based upon, he may show up here at some point, a black cat. And I also like to cook. And my daughter is a chef. She's a social worker now, when she was a chef. And so then being able to play and talk about food and something. And I didn't really do that. I've never really done that before in one of my novels. And that's been a kind of part of me aspect to it. I don't have second sense, but I do second, I guess you call it the extra paranormal sense. But I know people who do. And so it was also a kind of a fun thing to play with. Or claim they do anyway.
I always end up bringing pieces of myself into. I mean, people say, like, where do you get your ideas? And, you invent all this stuff. And it's true. A writer does invent things, but it all comes from things that you know. This one, I gave Josie my hair just because I've given enough characters other hair. And I thought, well, I know this hair and I can deal. But you always, that guy who always cuts his lawn with military precision. That goes in the book. Some characters can get. Or when you talk about your love of food. I love food, too. I love cooking. I can't help it. Somebody's eating, I want to know what they're eating, so I'm going to talk about it. There's just certain things. That's why animals are in all my books, and I'm going to see an animal get hurt. All the animals are totally pampered because I love animals so much. Got to have them.
I was going to say my animal. This is the first time I've been able to put an animal in a book. He's not particularly. He has a little edge. Juniper does. He's a friendly animal, but the character adores him, and we all love Junior. But it's also fun giving him a personality and making him kind of a character that really kind of stand to. And people do like Junior. Like you said, you're surprised when people now talk about the cat as their favorite character, and that has been kind of a surprise, as well as Aunt Phoenix in my books. What about Aunt Phoenix?
Everybody loves a crazy aunt, or like Dora and Bewitched. They just love a good, good crazy relative.
Yeah, it's so funny. You mentioned, Angela. That the animal is safe in your book, which is generally like a rule of cozies. Like if you have an animal in the book, like the animal has to survive. So I recently started reading the Leslie Meyer Lucy Stone books, and like the first one was written in like 1994, but like. The family pet gets murdered like halfway through the book.
Oh my God!
And they had this reindeer on the cover, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be this. And like I read it, and I just like sat there with like my jaw hanging open. And I looked at my husband and was like, oh my God, the cat just died in this book. And he was like, no. I was like, yeah. So I like emailed our sales rep. I'm like, hey, so you guys like the publisher just like republished these. Like next time you guys do that, you might want to go back and like. Maybe edit that part out because it didn't really have any bearing on the rest of the story. But I was just like, I can't believe this cat died in this book.
Right. People don't pick up a cozy for that. People want to pick up a cozy and feel warm and happy and interested and amused and no murdered animals.
Yeah, so I was like, and I was so fascinated, so I kept reading. So like now, if somebody wants to start the series, I start them on like the 3rd book. I'm like, look, you don't want to start with the first one. Like read these, and then like later, if you want to start the first one, let me know. I'll give you like the disclaimer, and you can try. But like, no, you can't start with the first one there.
You can just take your magic marker to all those lines.
Yeah. Just rip that page out.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, Valerie, you mentioned, having written PI novels before. So what were some of the differences or the challenges from going to writing a PI who is a professional crime solver to writing an amateur sleuth?
Well, certainly with my PI, with Tamara Hayle, because she's she's a parent and she's raising a son by herself, but also she knows what she's doing in terms of investigating. I mean, she knows the websites to go to and how to investigate on the internet. She owns a gun. She has a .38. She can pull out a gun and shoot someone if it comes. She's tough. It's also she lives in a tough town. The novels take place in Newark. And it's not like Grovesville, which is where Odessa lives, which is a suburban town. So that's a big difference. There's a kind of a tougher edge to Tamara and a much softer edge to Odessa Jones. The difference is that Odessa has to find a different way, as Angela mentioned about the books being a source of how she can solve crimes and the magic plays into it. Odessa's is cooking, and Odessa's is also finding a different way to find a murderer, to get people to talk to her, to investigate. She also has a friend who owns a restaurant, who's an ex-cop, and that's been helpful too in terms of the very legal aspect of policing. But
I would think the big issue would be, how do you, with the amateur sleuth, they have to have a reason for investigating.
Right, and that's a big deal too.
Right, it's like, how do you? I mean, why is a real estate agent / caterer going to be solving murders? I mean, why is my life solving your murder?
It comes back, I think, to character. Is the more you look at a character, the more you explore a character. What does this character have that would make him appeal, or make the Odessa or Josie want to know more about what is happening to someone they care about? It always comes back to that particular aspect of character.
And I think stakes. And you got to have some personal stakes there. Yeah.
There has to be something at stake. But you're right. And with the PI, it's easy. Well, it's not easy because it's much easier than this.
Hired. Yeah.
But you get hired, and it takes you in a different direction. But you have to. So it takes, I think, you have to explore more and think of different. It's a harder task as an amateur sleuth. But we'll see. The second one, I just finished the second book, and we'll see. It was a little different from the first one. I think maybe a little. I don't want to say edgier, but it's a same characters, but again, the whole aspect of families explored, and all the main characters, all the recurring. I'm sorry.
Oh, when does that one come out?
Not for a while. I just finished it and passed it in.
Okay. So. Got a year, probably.
Yeah, about a year.
So,
but it's called A Glimmer of Grief, and that's the title of that.
So, Angela, you mentioned that the second book comes out later this fall, and you're already working on the third one. So, to be able to get them out so quick, what is your writing process like?
Well, it's 9 months between books, and that actually is a fair amount of time. Just so you think, if you write, let's not get a calculator. Somebody who's good at math can do the math in their head. But say that you sat down for 2 hours a morning, which I try to get up first thing in the morning, I find is when I do my best sort of creative writing stuff. And if I can get up when it's still dark, even better. So I make coffee, feed the cats, and then sit down at the computer for about 2 hours. And I usually can write about 2,000 words, maybe 1,500, maybe 1,000 if my brain is just not going. So say that you write 1,000 words a day for 2 months, that's 60,000 words. 3 months is 90,000 words. So 2.5 months to get your first draft. That still leaves you 5.5 months to do revisions. So it's really is plenty of time to do a draft. But that's what I do first thing in the morning is I sit down and write. When I'm revising, which is most of the work, actually, I think, because I try to write a big, fast first draft. And I write according to a 4-act structure, which I think of ahead of time. We have to turn in a synopsis to the publisher ahead of time. And then I spend most of the time on revision. And I can revise most any time of the day. But that first draft, really creative writing, first thing in the morning when it's still dark out, that's when I'm at my best.
And how about you, Valerie? What's your writing process like?
It's very similar in that, but I think I usually I tend to write a certain number of pages every day, and I try to write every day of the week, except for Sundays and Saturdays I take off. And it's I think because I was an editor so long at a magazine, I will write a chapter and then go back and revise that chapter and then write from there. I don't revise and write in the same time frame, but it's definitely a different kind of rhythm. And it allows, in the time I finish the book, and let's say maybe 9 months, it's pretty much revised, and and it's there, and then I will do a total revision of the book. But I think the in me does not allow me to go too far, and then I just have to see, how does this work? And I also have to have a general sense of what I'm going to write when I sit down. I tend to be, I write maybe sometimes in the late morning, sometimes at night. I like to write, but when I sit down, I write, and I just get to work. Again, part of being an editor and formerly being a journalist is that you have a deadline and you meet the deadline. And if I'm going to do 5 pages or 4 to 5 pages.
Do you write out your
What I do is I have a very general sense of where the piece is going. So when I sit down, I kind of know in a general way where things are going to go. I know the characters. I've done often character sketches, so I know who they are. And I love writing dialogue. That's my favorite thing to write. And so that I get a stronger sense of characters after I write that. But but it'll change. Sometimes if I begin to write, and I may find that a character is taking a different direction. Occasionally halfway through the book, which was scary with this last one, I wasn't completely sure who the murderer was. I thought it was this character, and then suddenly I realized maybe it's not this one. Maybe it's somebody else, which is always scary because you have a deadline. And interesting enough, what I find is helpful, and I've told this to writers who are starting out and who ask me, if I have a question about, first of all, if you run into a writer's snag, it's almost like knitting. I don't know if you knit, but you have to kind of tear it out from the beginning and find out where you rent that snag, and then you can go from there. But also I find that if I go to sleep at night and say, this is going to sound hokey, but say, what happens here? That I will, somewhere in my mind and my subconscious, I must work it out. And when I get up often the next day or two, I'll have a solution to that particular problem that's confronting me in the piece, which is helpful. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I know it's hard because there's like a microsecond delay and it changes everything. But I think it's really, like I said, I plot out my books. I have an idea of what's going to happen. And I think I'm just going to sit down and carry out what I have to go for the next scene. And that might be the outline of what happens. But as I'm writing, I hear the story, I see the story, and then stuff happins. And it's like my brain was just waiting for me to sit down so it could continue the movie. It's a really interesting thing. I also have another theory. When I was a congressional investigator, I wrote congressional testimony reports and things like that. And I would always see the writing as I wrote. But writing fiction, I hear it. And in that time, since I've been hearing my writing as I write it, my spelling has gone right down the toilet. It's the funniest thing. And I think there's like this weird, listening part. Another thing I noticed is that when I write fiction, I have to be drinking something. In the morning, it's coffee, and herbal tea and water. In the evenings, I learned to stay away from the alcohol if you got to be drinking a lot when you write. And I think it's another thing. It's like it's making my mouth sort of move as I'm hearing the words. There you go. I don't know.
I also read when I write. I realize that I'm talking as I'm writing, and it's like if someone happens to pass by, they'll hear me. And that is similar. I hear the words. I hear them. It's connected to maybe from writers are basically storytellers, and that you would tell a story, and that's what you do when you're telling yourself a story or you're telling your readers a story, and that's what comes through. It's just writing. It's like hearing it, and it's like move back and forth on my computer, and that's where it comes. Certainly, I know exactly what you mean, Angela. That it's a similar kind of thing. My spelling has gotten worse. I think it's age in my case. But it's definitely I find I have to look up words for spelling more than I have used to. So the dictionary is right there, and the thesaurus is right next to it.
And I write on computers. Spell check lets me know. But I have gotten it only happened once, but there was one point where I was just about to write of, and suddenly I was stymied. It's like I know it's not UV. I know that's not it, but how do you spell the word? And it just shows how your brain goes. And I used to be like a spelling bee. So
I know that happens to me, has happened to me as well.
So as you sat down to start, plotting out kind of or getting the first idea for the first book, did you envision this as a series? And if so, did you have like kind of a general character arc that you knew you wanted to go with, or are you just kind of discovering it as you go from book to book? Let's start with Valerie.
Well, for me, in my case, so it depends upon it depends on the publisher, because they bought the 2 books, and I don't know. Hopefully, they'll buy some more. We'll see. But in a sense, you have another book that is going to be done. It's part of the contract, and you leave room for it to develop, but you don't. It really depends, I suppose, on what you're doing and what the demand is for the book. Publishing is a business, and that's an aspect of it. In terms of one thing I have, just because I did write far more of the PI books than I have at this point, the cozies, I had to, as the more books I wrote, the more I would get notes from readers like, you kill that character off in book 3. So you have a sense of, I was always getting caught up with stuff and needing. And when I wrote this second book of the Odessa Jones, this new series, I literally had to go back and double check spellings of names and what did I do, even though it was only a year or so ago, to make sure that they were still consistent. And that is, whenever you do a series, you want to make sure there's a consistency to it. And then if you're working, let's say, on book 3 or 4, and say, why did I do that in book 1? Now I have to go in a different direction. And that is kind of a drag. But I think that, again, if you have a strong sense of the main character, the protagonist, and you really can let her or him develop in a way there are all kinds of things you can do. And again, going back to family and creating characters. And Angela, you said, what do you do with a PI is hired? Is you can always bring in some character from the past that they did, some long lost sister, brother of somebody in her world, and who presents a problem, and you can have some fun that way. So many things you can do with it. So it's always a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. Scary sometimes, but a good.
Oops, I think Valerie, I think your connection is a little bit slower than ours. Are you getting that sense, John? It's like
okay, sorry.
Voice comes through is totally clear.
Is it better? No.
Oh yeah, I can hear you. It's weird spotty things, probably weird weather or something.
Yeah.
But so for me, right, I mean, just like you were saying, Valerie, it's like I knew I had a certain number of books that I had to work with. And I hope, I'm having so much fun writing this series. I'm crossing my fingers that I'll get a contract to write some more. But so I knew I had to build a world that was going to last. I've learned from earlier books, you got to give your main character some family, because it's just so tempting when you're writing a book. You just think about your main character and you forget that they might have a family and things like that. But you've got to build some stuff that's going to be happening in the future. And it was a small town, so I knew I'd have to have, a cafe owner. There might be a post office. There's not, but there's a postman in this one. So I could build sort of from that. I wanted to get a little bit of balance of gender. And then, but I thought about the romantic plot line, subplot, probably the hardest, because there is so much cliche in the cozy world about that romantic plot line. And you can just shoot, I think, a series by either having the couple get together too early or doing the love triangle that will not die. And, there's a lot of those sorts of things. So I've given that a lot of thought, and that's why I stuck in the main book. Well, I don't want to say it in case somebody hasn't read it, but I'm trying to make it. Yeah. And there is something, when you write murder mysteries, there's always a way to take care of a wife that you don't need. But, there's rules too, right? You don't want to dirty.
So I wanted to touch briefly too. So we mentioned, Angela, that you also wrote the Kite Shop Mysteries under the name Clover Tate. Was there any talk of potentially this one coming out as Clover Tate, or was it those were those books and that's done and now you're going to be Angela?
Clover, unfortunately, I mean, she was an amazing woman. She taught Cher how to dance. She helped, she's basically, I gave Clover this whole back life that everybody would like, but she unfortunately was lost in an airplane that she was piloting around the world and will never come back. But Clover Tate was a house series for Berkeley. So they own Clover. So if Clover comes back, it's all on them, but I don't think Clover's coming back. I think she wrote her last Kite Shot mystery. So this was going to be then under my name.
And so for you, Valerie, we mentioned in your intro that you had done some romance stuff under a pseudonym as well. Since you were doing cozies and you had done PI stuff before, was there any talk of this one potentially coming out with a pseudonym, or was it going to be Valerie Wilson Wesley from the go?
Well, I was going to be my name from the go. I think I made a mistake when I did the paranormals under a pen name, because then a lot of readers who liked the PI know readers will follow you. If they like you, they will follow you no matter what your genre. And I think that in coming up with the Savanna Welles, which was, I think that readers didn't realize who liked the PI novels, that she's written this kind too. So I decided right away, anything I write will be under my real name. Even the children's books too. With the children's books, you have to be careful because I don't want a child stumbling into the Tamara Hayle series, which can be kind of graphic. So, and that was because I have written, for kids, but I definitely will keep, anything I write is going to be under my full name. But it's oh, you were going to ask about the paranormal.
I was going to say, I think that you did a really good job with this series of, like you said, they're cozy, but they've got a little bit of an edge. So I think that you did a really good job that if a cozy reader picks them up, they're going to enjoy them, and that would potentially lead them into the PI books. Or if a PI reader picked them up, like, oh, there's a new Valerie Wilson Wesley out, like it's not like super, super cozy. So I think that you found a good kind of balance between the two, so that way you could drag readers from either side of it into your other stuff.
You can only write what you can write. You can only write and be honest with your writing, and only write what for you as a writer. And no matter what subgenre, I mean, they may fit into a category, but I think ultimately that's what you write. You're doing the best you can do as a writer, and no matter what you're writing, even if people have read my children's series, and which is maybe about 5 years ago. I haven't had, maybe older than that. And have said, she sounds like the PI, even though she's 8. So it's, so you have a voice, you work with that. But, and then of course, what's happened with me, with some of the kids who liked the Wilhelmina series when they were little, went to the PI series and they were older. And now maybe as older still will go to the cozy series. But you just write the best you can do. And you write from your heart, and you try to give readers the best book you can give them. Hopefully, people who love cozies will embrace Odessa, and but I will do the best I can do in the writing of her and the creating of her. And I think this world is an interesting world, so we'll see. We'll see what folks say.
So we have a question from Renee. So as we mentioned, both A Glimmer of Death and Bait and Witch are both first in these series. So for your other books, do you think that they need to be read in sequence, or do you think that people can jump around in your other series? Let's start with Angela.
I think people can jump around. Of course, there's always a subplot that will have a larger arc than one book. But for the most part, people can jump around. And I feel like for my Vintage Clothing series, which is the first series I wrote, I love all the books, of course, but I feel like I got to be a better writer later on. And the latest one is set in Paris, so there is that. But yeah, I think for mine, you can certainly jump around. How about you?
I think the same with mine. It's always good to start with an earlier book because it really tells you the background. For the Tamara Hayle series, and certainly with the Odessa, this is the first book, so they'll really get a sense of what's going on. But there are references made to characters in the earlier books, and although you always kind of have something in the book that you're writing that kind of gives a hint of what someone is or who someone is. It's still, I think, more fun if you begin with an earlier book, let's say the first one, and go from there. And whenever I start a new series, that's what I do. I always read the first book of the series and then work up from there. And because I want to really get the full kind of, scene that the writer is dealing with. And so that's what I always enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll
so
sometimes like it.
So just tell readers to try one and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tend to sometimes just kind of just bookseller wise, like if it's a longer series and there's a new one out that sounds good, sometimes I'll just jump in just to see if it's one like if an average reader that hasn't read them before can pick them up. But I generally like to start with firsts when I can. So next question, I wanted to ask both of you, what is something that you have read recently that you loved? Let's start with Valerie.
I've been reading, I like Louise Penny's book. And her latest one, which is not the latest one, the one before that. I love Tracy Clark's a young writer out of Chicago. Kelly Garrett is really called Homicide. I think she's a really fine writer. And I just did a talk with V.M. Burns, who is another mystery writer, and they're all very, who I like her books as well. So the more I get into cozies, the more cozy writers I'm reading, although Tracy Clark is not a cozy writer. But it's I'm enjoying Angela's book. I really enjoyed your book, Angela. So I'm really
I enjoyed it.
But
I read yours. I think
those are, it's a whole. I read lots of different kinds of books. To be perfectly honest, I read mysteries like Louise. Walter Mosley's, who I also love. So one of my favorite writers. So it's you read what really interests you. I read a lot of historical books. Isabel Wilkerson's book Cast, which I'm currently reading now. So it's a kind of everything to inform me as a writer. Everything you read gives you something, and that's what I have found.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to mention, since you mentioned Walter Mosley, if you guys are watching out there, if there are any other Walter Mosley fans, he has a brand new book that just came out, and we're super excited. Next Thursday, the AP reviewer and mystery reviewer guru Aline Cogdill is going to be chatting with Walter here on our Facebook and YouTube. So definitely come check that out.
Be there.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. And so how about you, Angela? What's something that you read recently that you really liked?
I love vintage crime novels, especially ones written by women. There was a fair number of women who wrote novels between the 1920s up through the 60s, and then women just seemed to be drained from the mystery novel writings, and then men took over, and then there were Sisters in Crime. A lot of people don't realize there were a lot of mystery writers in the early days. Lately, I've really been into Helen McCloy. She's president of Mystery Writers in America for a while, and she's an amazing writer. I love that she describes the outfits of the people she's wearing. So you can read something that was written in 1952, and she'll describe what the women are wearing. I can see it so well in my head. So Helen McCloy. Yeah. As far as something contemporary, I just read Anthony Horowitz' Moonflower Murders, sort of a book inside of a book, and that started as my Christmas read. I wanted, with the whole pandemic and being shut in, it's I just wanted, so I had it sitting on I have a big old Chinese wedding bed in the living room where I do a lot of reading, and so I had it sitting on a little tea table there, just waiting for Christmas. So I read that, and I really enjoyed that.
Great. So just wanted to recap for those of you who might have joined us late. We have been chatting with Valerie Wilson Wesley, whose new book, A Glimmer of Death, is available now. It's the first in her series. And we've also been chatting with Angela M. Sanders, whose new book, Bait and Witch, has also just come out, which is also the first in her series. If you missed any part of the chat, once we are done, YouTube and Facebook will archive them, so you'll be able to catch them from the beginning. Sometimes YouTube takes just a little bit longer to encode the video than Facebook, but the Facebook one is up almost instantaneously. We have copies of both books in store, so if you want to, I dropped links where you can order them from murderbooks.com. You can come into the store and visit us to check them out. I think we touched on this a little bit too, but before we head out, do y'all want to tell us what you've got coming up next? We'll start with Angela.
Well, 7 Year Witch is coming out in beginning of September. That's book number 2. And then Witch and Famous is what I'm working on now. And so that'll be 9 months after that, I believe it'll be coming out. And then I have a short story called Blackout that is going to be an anthology by Curious Blue that is about good Southern witches. And that one I think will be out in March at some point. If you go to my website, you can subscribe to my newsletter, which I promise you is a good newsletter, and it has all these updates in it.
And how about you, Valerie?
I just finished my second book, which I think will be out in about a year, A Glimmer of Grief. And I have also a website, but I'm not as good. I have to be careful I have to do more blogging and more. I'm behind on the newsletter, but I promise you I will be. Not since I had to finish this second book, and that took a lot of energy. But I'm going to get more. I found social media sometimes hard to really get into, but I'm going to get better at it. Takes up a lot of time from writing, but I'm going to get better at it. And I'm, certainly website will be news about not only that, but also my other books, as well as at some point I'm thinking about the next book of the Tamara Hayle series. So that's on the way as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining me this evening. I'm so glad that we were able to do this virtually. I'm sorry we're not able to do it in the store, but hopefully once the world kind of rights itself again, we can get you guys both to Houston and actually do it here in the store.
That would be so fun. And Valerie,
It would be great.
Hope I can meet you in person.
I'm so happy to have read your book and have enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you both. It's so good to have met both and to spend some time with both of you.
Y'all have a good evening and take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right.
I hope so.